This is the Psychology of Black Womanhood podcast, where we bring research into real-world conversations. I'm Dr. Dion Stevens, your host, co-author of the Psychology of Black Womanhood book, and a professor of psychology. I'm excited to have you with us, so let's get into today's episode. Many of the most enduring and culturally resonant television shows and films centering the lives of Black women place our friendships at the heart of the story. Think Survival of the Thickest Girlfriends, Waiting to Exhale, Living Single, Insecure. These popular narratives remind us that sisterhood is not a side plot, but a central force, a space where Black women find joy, affirmation, conflict, healing, and growth. In this episode, we're exploring why seeing Black women's friendships on the screen and in storytelling truly matters with Dr. Imani Cheers. An award-winning digital storyteller, director, producer, and filmmaker, Dr. Cheers is an associate professor of media and public affairs at the George Washington University. A cultural curator, director, activist, and academic based in Washington, D.C., she's the author of Sacred Sisterhoods, a celebration of Black women's friendships on television and in film. Let's start off by talking about why we as Black women really like seeing sisterhood on the screens.
Well, first of all, Dr. Stevens, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you and your audience and share a little bit about what has been arguably, I think, some of my most meaningful work. And it's Sacred Sisterhoods, a celebration of Black women's friendships on television and in film. I really grew up on literature by strong Black women, so whether it be an Alice Walker or a Terry McMillan, and then to see those depictions, those representation of those characters on screen was really powerful for me.
Right.
As a teenager or preteen. And then when I could turn on the television, and this is in what I like to consider the heyday, the highlight. I mean, we're in a different renaissance now, but when I think of literally from like 1984 to like 2004, and that 20 years that absolutely shaped myself, my identity as a young Black girl going into my early adulthood. And so it started with seeing the sisters in particular on The Cosby Show. So I think of everything from Rudy to Vanessa, but then also to Sandra and Denise. And then to see Denise, the spinoff of A Different World, and to see her go off to college, and of course choosing her parents' alma mater, this historically Black college, and to see those friendships. Denise, when she got there with Jaleesa, and then of course with Whitley, and then obviously when Kim came in and Freddie, and all of these Black women, and I aspired to be them. They were brilliant. They were beautiful. Their ruptures and repairs, they had so much of what I was aspiring to be. And then fast forward, of course, Living Single, I'm in high school watching that representation. That's actually the book cover illustration is Living Single. It's that couch. So I wanted to really put together a scholarly work, but also a popular cultural connection between these relationships. And I knew it wasn't just me. I knew that there were an entire generation of Black women who the first time we were able to see ourselves on television or in film were through these sisterhood relationships. And they were so sacred. So at the last season of Insecure, it's actually the first chapter written by two absolutely brilliant scholars, Candace Harris and Marquetta Gamage. They wrote Best Friends Forever. And we look at the first line of the book, looks at, Molly, who was played by Yvonne Orji, says to Issa, played by Issa Rae, "Thank you for loving me when I was me." And you realize that this entire 5-season series, it wasn't about the relationships that these two women were having, the romantic relationships in their lives with these men, but it was really about them. It was about their friendship.
I love how you talked about the heyday of Black women and Black television, which, as you said that, I'm like, that's true. They're between 84 to 2004. And so I'm wondering if you could maybe talk about then maybe how the portrayals of Black women's friendships on television and film have evolved over the past decades.
Great question. And I truly believe that the shift came about when Black women took creative control of the content. And so I look at even in that heyday that I mentioned, you have the rise of even going back to a different world. You have someone like Debbie Allen. Debbie Allen took creative control as executive producer of A Different World in the second season. And she talks pretty vocally about how, she was like, wait a minute, everything from the set design to the clothes to the casting. She was like, we got to change all this. Like, none of this is authentic. And it's when Black women started getting in the writer's room, started becoming directors, started becoming showrunners, that we really saw this shift. Yvette Lee Bowser talks very vocally about when Fox, the network executives, came to her and she was writing on A Different World, and that space, Debbie Allen really created kind of an incubator, so to speak, for Black creatives, men and women, but very much so Black women who were coming up in Hollywood in this late 80s, early 90s. And Yvette Lee Bowser, writing on A Different World, got an opportunity to write and end up becoming the showrunner and producer of Living Single. I think a lot about that was the shift. The shift was ownership. The shift was when Black women were able to exert creative control, that the representation intentionally became more dimensional. It became more intentional, more inclusive of everything from, like I said, complexion to hairstyles, to wardrobe, to set design. All we were now seeing this glimpse on the big and small screen for Black women's authenticity.
Like everything you're saying, you could see my face. I'm like, yep, I know what you're talking.
Yes.
It's
Oh
funny
my
how
God.
we can just cue as Black women click in and understand this. Are these examples of sacred sisterhood in mainstream television different from those that we see in Black centered productions? I have a lot of friends who are not Black and they've never heard of these shows. But unfortunately, we watch TV very separate. TV
Sure.
media is very segregated and movies segregated in the United States.
Living Single, both set in New York City. Obviously, anyone who's ever been to New York City, there's 5 boroughs. They're very different, right? But it was always amazing to me how in Friends, on Manhattan, there were never any people of color anywhere. I was like, not until like well later, where all of a sudden we got Aisha Tyler playing Ross's girlfriend. I was like, where the hell did she come from?
One of my favorite ones to think about is also Sex in the City. This was huge. And for years, they never had a Black friend.
They had Black men and they talked about Black men sexually, but they barely, if any, had any Black women until the reboot. People were like, wait a minute, if you gonna come back 20 years later, all those representational missteps y'all did, somehow also being in New York and like never seeing people of color around you.
Right.
You need to come correct this time.
But I'm also then wondering if it has to do with the genre, how the Black women's friendships shift by this genre. What does your research say about that?
It says 2 things. One, when you have Issa Rae talks about all the time that everyone was like, we want a longer than 30, minute episodes or 27-minute episodes or whatever they were doing at HBO. And she was like, it's a comedy, right? Like, it's not a drama. We're not going to give you a 60-minute episode because we're not a drama. And when I think of some of the dramas that I see Black women's friendships on, I get a little frustrated because I don't see them. There's going to be Shonda, like I said, there's going to be Scandal. Scandal was an hour. Right. All Shonda shows are dramas. So they're going to be longer. They're going to be a little more in depth. You can see some of those relationships play out. But some of the criticism that in our research we have that there is a genre, a style. You have more time with a drama versus a comedy. Right. Sitcom, but I have also often questioned again, why I don't see as many. I don't see friendships. I know how television works. Most of us understand when you think of there's like four is a number, right? You're gonna have four friends. If you look at Living Single, right, you had the four female friends, and then you had the two guys. Girlfriends, great example. Four friends, then you had the other male characters and some other female characters, right? Even when you look at Insecure, same thing. Four friends, and then the peripheral relationships and obviously reoccurring characters, and so there is a format to TV. Abbott Elementary, because I was just catching up on a couple episodes last night, is another one. I talk about the friendship between Barbara and Janine, these intergenerational friendships, kind of mentor friendships, which I really love. And that also is because Quinta is the creator. She's not the showrunner because she's creator and she writes, and she can't do every job on set. She's not Tyler Perry, so she's gonna she's gonna kind of stay in. I'm gonna act and I'm gonna create. I'm gonna write a little bit, but then she's gonna pass this along to other people because it's production. Many hands make really amazing work. If people are like, oh, well, I see Black women on The Real Housewives of Atlanta. I see Black women on Love and Hip Hop. I see Black, and I'm like, that's not what I'm talking about. And so I have to be in, like you said, the genre does matter in these larger conversations because, yes, Black women are on TV all over the place. You turn on a network, Bravo in particular, and you're going to see a slew of Black women. Bravo does not do dramas. They have their roster are reality shows, and that's cooking shows, reality shows like Top Chef. I love Top Chef. But like they're not going to have these scripted, structured stories. Reality TV is a little scripted for those who are like, no, but it is. They're going to play up the drama for ratings, and that's frustrating right now, honestly, because when we want to have a counter narrative, and again, Black women are not a monolith. So there are people who love Love and Hip Hop and who love the Real Housewives franchise, and even going back to shows like Flavor of Love. Like we can go back. That if that's what you want to watch, right? Like we're all entitled to our preferences when it comes to content. But for what myself and my colleagues in the book, what we wanted to do with this project was really pay homage to the content creators, the characters, the Black women who honestly have not received the accolades that they deserve. They have not received the grace in Hollywood that they deserve. You have a number of showrunners and people who, Issa should have got another season of Rap Shit. Like, I'm just going to say that. It was quite disappointing to see, even after, again, a successful run with Insecure, that she wasn't given more time to develop that show. And when I really think about where Black women's representation on television and film, scripted, very particularly, I am hoping we continue, because Hollywood is changing, right? We all know that Hollywood is changing. Budgets are slashing. We just came off of obviously a writer's strike a couple of years ago. AI is changing everything. And so when I think about what does that mean for the representation of Black women, I am hoping that whether it be an Ava DuVernay, who I think most people might remember, Queen Sugar was a book turned right into a series, that we still have creative leverage and leeway to tell complex, interesting, funny, sad, inspiring stories.
Do you think that there are within group differences in the ways in which Black women's friendships are portrayed in the media, such as like does class or age, sexuality, like you were talking about the child, and how they even brought in like regional differences?
Mhm.
How is that playing out on the screen in terms of Black women's friendships?
Yeah, one of the things that I find really important about the representation of Black women's friendships on television and film is one of my colleagues, Dr. Alicia Gamble, she wrote a chapter in Sacred Sisterhoods about queer representation. And when I think of some of, like I said, even going back to the women of Brewster Place, like I said, there was a lesbian relationship in that film. Again, we're talking about the 80s and how beautiful that representation was. And even fast forward, there was a film, Pariah, that came out in the early, like 2009,
Yeah.
which is really powerful. And then even I think of The Wire, where Cream McGigg, she's a police officer, but her queerness, her lesbianness wasn't, it was just him as a lesbian, the same way like it should be. Like, and it wasn't. And here we are in Baltimore having these conversations. So I do think that there are regional differences. I think of Shantae Brown White. She wrote a chapter in Sacred Sisterhoods called Down in the Valley, and talking about strippers, survival, and sisterhood on P Valley. And if anyone watched P Valley, and Black Southern culture, right? And so when I think about the ways in which regional differences, whether it be the shy characters or we're insecure, they're out in Los Angeles, young Black women. You have, shows, obviously Living Single. They're in New York, they're in Brooklyn and Harlem, towards the second and third seasons, and it's really there are class differences that we talk a little bit about. You don't see them as much. I remember that in Girlfriends, very particularly. I mean, they're all roommates, but like Lynn was kind of like the struggling actress, but then also kind of Sinclair was the struggling actress on Living Single, and the ways in which she came and she worked for. I mean, let's be fair, Queen Latifah character. She's an entrepreneur. She's running her own magazine, right? Shout out to the magazines, running her own magazine. Her best friend Max is a lawyer, right? And so you kind of have these class differences because I mean Regine, played by the incomparable Kim Fields, but she worked at like a boutique, like until like later on where she got a job sort of styling. She also was kind of like, so you had a class difference right there in this show with these families who are these, and again, Queen Latifah was open in that show about the struggles of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
There's a whole episode about borrowing, 500. I think it was about $500 from Max to cover like some bills for the magazine. And so when I think about the way in which, and we saw it again, we saw it in Insecure. Molly was a lawyer, right? We see these different roles, these different professions that these Black women play. Issa struggling from day one, right? Trying to figure out she didn't want to work at the We Got Y'all, and then we see her career kind of evolve throughout the series. But Kelly was a CPA. What I love in particular about so many of these regional stories, even going back to Queen Sugar, based in Louisiana, is that these regional, everything from dialogue, dialect, the setting in most of these places. And so what I've loved about how we see Black women, Abbott Elementary being in Philadelphia, and very much so you have that relationship between Barbara and Janine, where these are intergenerational. They're mentors, they're mentee. There's that running storyline. Taraji P. Henson plays Quinta Brunson, Janine's mother, and even that sort of tension between her character and Barbara on the times when she's there. And she just had, like, Janine just celebrated her 30th birthday. That was an episode I watched like 3 days ago. And there was, a question about like, she didn't want to like just go to dinner, and was she happy? And it was so interesting to see these sisterhoods, these friendships, these mentorships playing out, seeing how Taraji's character in that episode, makes a comment about like Janine can't be happy. Like she's still teaching second grade. When she go teach third and fourth grade? And Barbara was like, that's not really how it works. It's like she teaches the younger kids. And there's a bit of protectiveness there, even from her mother. And I found it really, and what I love about the representation, so whether it be a Katori Hall, who was the showrunner for P-Valley, or again, what Ava DuVernay did with Queen Sugar, Issa with Insecure, even going to Lena out at the Shy, and even bringing it back to what Yvette Lee Bowser was doing with Living Single in New York, that we have these regional shows that bring in the culture of the cities that they're placed in, and then we see these class differences amongst characters. We see career differences amongst characters. Lawyers tend to run throughout kind of many of these shows, but teachers, as you mentioned, entrepreneurs, and I think that in particular, as we watch characters evolve. We watch them struggle. We watch their friends show up for them in different ways. And whether it be, I can't necessarily pay your rent this month, but you can come stay with me, right? Like all of these things that I find really powerful. And even what we saw with On a Different World, as we watched these characters from freshman year through their graduate degrees, and for them to sort of grow up and go off in these class differences. And if we remember, Whitley had to stay an extra year because she wanted to be an art buyer, and Kim was dead set, she's going to be in med school. And so when I really, Jaleesa being an older student, non-traditional student who had come, I think at the time she was like 24, but they were 18. And so 24, she might as well have been 40 because they were like, oh my God, you're so old. But I found that hilarious as well. And so we've seen these generational sort of differences. And we still have these bonds of friendship and mentorship and love.
So what's next for you as an author and as a researcher looking at this? Because the media keeps changing, like you said, there's new things coming. You said there's AI coming. There's all these new dynamics. And culturally, we're going through a really interesting shift for Black women in our personal lives. And of course, we're looking to the media to give us different lens. How are you working towards addressing that?
Continuing to create my next project that I am just sort of proposing at the moment, but I am really fascinated by, again, Black people owning, like I said, my chapter in the book. I wrote the intro, I wrote the chapter, I edited, but was really looking at ownership. And so Mr. Johnson, John H. Johnson, Johnson Publishing Corporation, I have a couple hundred copies of Negro Digest, Jet, Ebony, South Africa. My father was managing editor of Ebony, South Africa for its 5-year run. And I want to do something with that. I want to pay, again, I love paying homage. I love giving people their flowers, whether they're here or not. Mr. Johnson died in 2005. So, but the influence and the excellence that his work produced, I think deserves to be celebrated, studied. And I know that at the moment in academic spaces, it is we study the Black press, but no one has yet done this. So stay tuned for that. I don't know what it's going to look like. It's going to primarily focus on the diasporic work. So Ebony, South Africa, his ability to shed light, yes, on Black Americans, but then to really bring the African diaspora into Black American homes in a way that, again, we couldn't trust other publications to be accurate, but you could trust, you knew that if it was in Jet, it was in Ebony, right? Yeah. It was important. And so that will be hopefully in the near future. And then I have a couple other film projects looking at sort of interesting sports stories and highlighting very specifically Black women who often get ignored or just, again, forgotten in times and places that I find disheartening and, quite frankly, disrespectful. So I'm all about ways to celebrate Black people. Like Risa said, I'm rooting for everybody Black all the time.
That was Dr. Imani M. Cheers sharing insights from her research and book, Sacred Sisterhoods, a celebration of Black women's friendships on television and in film. To dive deeper into Dr. Cheers' work, including on how to get her book and connect with her on social media, head over to this episode page on our website at psychologyofblackwomanhood.com. We hope you're enjoying our discussion centering research in the real world. Conversations like these are made richer through voices like Dr. Cheers, and we hope you found something meaningful to carry with you today. Our audience keeps growing, and that's all thanks to you. Your love and support means the world to us. We're grateful that you're sharing the podcast with your family and friends, helping to amplify these important conversations. You can continue to support us by following us on Instagram or Facebook. And don't forget to check out our website to keep up to date with all of our activities and future episodes. Again, thanks for listening. And until next time, keep showing up and connecting research to the lives of Black women.